Welcome everyone to Goodknits, my knitting channel here on YouTube. For those that are brand new here, I'm Sherry and I am a Canadian expat living in Amsterdam. It's been about 2 months since my last podcast episode, and that's just because I really need to take a break. I had some stuff going on in my personal life, and that also meant that I wasn't really knitting that much. So you really haven't missed much in those last 2 months. You'll see from what I'm able to share today that there wasn't a whole lot of knitting going on. That's okay, because sometimes you just really need to take a break and focus on other things, and that's definitely what I needed. I feel my knitting mojo coming back, and I finally felt like I had enough to share again, so I figured I'd sit down, film a podcast episode. I have some stuff to update you on, like the knitting event that I hosted, and I'm going to be co-hosting a knit along in the coming months. So I want to get into that today and share to see if hopefully some of you want to participate. So you can see I've switched up my filming location for today, and that's because with the sweater that I'm wearing, I figured if I filmed in my living room, I was just going to blend in with all the furniture and walls around me. So I figured I'd kind of come back to my knitting room, which is originally where I started filming my podcasts, and try here for a change. I also think we finally have some sun here in Amsterdam, so getting some good light, which is nice. So I just really wanted to make sure that my sweater was really the star today and you could really appreciate it against a more colorful background. So something I wanted to update you all on today was the knitting event that I hosted in December with my friend Melanie. We had our first Knitting in the Dam event at Cafe Brecht, and it was such a success. So I think we had about 27 of us in the end. The location can only hold roughly 30 comfortably. And it was just so nice to meet so many knitters of different ages, different skill levels here in Amsterdam. It was really, for me at least, the perfect location. Anytime I have a knitting date, I always take people to Cafe Brecht. I just love the cozy grandma vibes there, and the staff were so wonderful in hosting us. Everybody was very appreciative and seemed to really enjoy themselves, and they've since asked that we continue to host those events throughout the year. I'm very excited to say that on March 2nd, which is a Sunday again, we will be hosting another event at Cafe Brecht. Tickets aren't on sale yet, but if you're watching this and you're interested, make sure to save that date in your calendar. It will start at 10:30 again and run till about 1 o'clock. Tickets will go on sale in probably early February. So if you want to make sure you don't miss out on those, because tickets will be limited, make sure that you follow me on Instagram so you know when tickets go on sale. And I'm hoping to see the same friendly faces, but also even more knitters. Hopefully March will work better for people. I know December was quite tough with the Christmas holidays, but March, we're getting into spring. Hopefully people are also wanting to get out, see people a little bit more, because hopefully we'll have nicer weather here. The plan with that is that we hope to host roughly every 2 months, might be every 3, we'll see. I just need to see how much time I have with my new job as well, but it doesn't take a ton of effort to host that. So I am really looking forward to it, and I hope to see you there. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the knitting content. It's going to be quite light today. Like I said, I haven't been knitting a ton in the last couple months, but I did want to sit down and film because I have my sweater number 11 light from My Favorite Things Knitwear, which is my only finished object at the moment. And I am really, really happy with how this turned out. As you can see, if you know the sweater number 11 light pattern, this is a heavily modified version of it. I took my inspiration from a knitting project on Instagram. I really loved her version where she just did this crew neck instead of the high fold over collar. And I'm not a huge fan of twisted rib. Knitting twisted rib isn't very much fun, but also I don't mind the look of it, but it's not my absolute favorite. So I just went and did standard 1x1 rib on the bottom as well as the sleeves, and then a simple crew neck 1x1 rib collar. So this is a drop shoulder design, and it has these beautiful shoulder details along the back, which is really what drew me to the pattern in the first place. I really, really wanted just a cozy, oversized sweater in a really basic neutral color. I've realized through knitting, I actually don't have that many basics in terms of colors. Most of my sweaters are either that really white, gray color, which I've since realized doesn't suit me that well, or they are much brighter, like a deep petrol color, rust, aubergine. And I want to try to work in a little bit more neutrals so that they are more interchangeable within my wardrobe. I knit this as the pattern specified on 4mm needles. So originally I was planning to just knit it with the Gapard Puro held single, which is what this swatch is. And I got gauge, but in the end, I just felt like this was really lacking some dimension in color. So I ended up opting last minute to go ahead and buy some mohair, and I ended up getting the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in oatmeal. And these really paired nicely together. So you can see this sweater has a lot more dimension now. It's very, very subtle, but the mohair adds a little bit extra to it. And I'm really happy with the combination. I did end up being slightly off in gauge at the end. So this was meant to be 20 by 28 and I was 22 by 28. I could maybe stretch it a little bit more, but I don't want to do that. I'm actually really, really happy with the fit on me. So I'm just gonna leave it as is. It's finally a sweater where I feel like I got the sleeves to the absolute perfect length on the first try. In general, this sweater went quite smoothly. I cast it on November 22nd and I finished it January 19th, which is a little bit longer than typically a sweater would take me when this is really one of the only things I was working on. But like I said, I wasn't knitting that much, so this really was a slow, kind of mindless knit that I would just pick up as I felt like I needed something to work on. So unfortunately, a knitting project didn't have any notes on her version, and I couldn't quite tell from the picture how many rows she ended up doing for her collar, but I figured it was somewhere between about 7 to 10. What I ended up doing originally was I knit 10 rounds on 3mm needles, which was a whole size down from what I knit the sweater on. Then I did a purl round, folded over, and then sewed it down as I was binding off. What I found with that though is it ended up sitting too high on me. And then I think because of the 3mm needles and because I use those to also bind off, it was just really, really tight. So it was high, it was tight. I'll insert a picture of what it looked like. And also I realized about halfway through that I was slightly twisted. So you could tell it had a little bit of a lean in it, which is also what happened on my Oslo sweater when I first started knitting, and it really drives me crazy every time I wear it. I knew no matter what, I was gonna have to rip that out. And then as I was working on the sleeves, I also realized that the 10 balls of yarn I originally bought of the Puro Lana were not gonna get me very far. So I had to make some tough choices because in the end, I was really playing a very, very intense game of yarn chicken. This is literally what I have left, plus whatever is in my swatch. So not a whole lot of yarn to play with, and I wouldn't have been able to finish my second sleeve if I hadn't have ripped out the collar. So what I opted to do was take the collar completely out, re-knit it on 3.5mm needles, which is also what I did all the ribbing trim on. And I did 7 rows, then the purl round, 7 more rows, and then knit it down. And I'm really happy with how this turned out. So it's maybe sitting a little bit loose, but I can also put in some elastic to tighten that up and make sure it's not going to stretch over time. For me, it's sitting, perfectly straight. I don't see any leaning one way or the other. It really sits at this perfect point on my neck and collarbone where it doesn't bother me. And in the end, I ended up being able to use the Puro Lana for the whole neck. I kind of figured I would get to the 7 rounds and then maybe have to switch to just mohair for the inside. But I was able to stretch out the yarn that I had to actually finish the whole sweater, which surprised me because I really thought I bought enough yarn to even be able to do the whole folded neckline if I wanted, but maybe I did end up cutting out a ball at some point, and that extra ball is what I needed to even do this amount. I did buy 6 of the mohairs and only ended up using about 4.5, so I do have this whole extra ball plus about 11 grams more. Maybe I'll turn that into a hat at some point next season. I really, really like the specific shade of this oatmeal. I think this is a really nice fit for my skin tone. Much better than the kind of putty, which leans more cool. So oatmeal, definitely a color that I'm very happy with. So then the final measurements for this, like I said, my gauge was off. It was supposed to be 20 by 28. I ended up getting 22 stitches by 28 rows. So length for the sleeves and body, really, really happy with. The overall ease is not exactly what it should have been. So the final measurement for this should have been around 126 centimeter for the bust, and I ended up about 118 centimeters, which is about 31 centimeters of positive ease. And in all honesty, for me, I don't think I need a whole lot more than that. I just end up looking like I'm drowning in my clothes because just proportionally, I don't find it really works for me to have a really, really oversized sweater. And especially because this is already drop shoulder, which already gives it this bigger feeling. I think 31 centimeters is perfect for me. For the most part, I'm usually happy with about 20 to 30 centimeters. Just in general though, I am noticing when it comes to most of my recent projects, my row gauge has been off, even though I have been gauge swatching. And actually I did a steam block on this when I had just done the back panel to see, because when I added the mohair, I wasn't 100% sure that I would still be on gauge. And I didn't want to do a whole new gauge swatch because I just wanted to cast on. And when I steam blocked, it was fine. I did get gauge, but I guess just, yeah, as you're knitting the sweater, as I did a full wet block, it just seemed to change a little bit. It's okay. It's just maybe something I need to be a little bit more mindful of. And maybe I do need to start knitting gauge swatches in the round, which I've never done. Just seems like a hassle and a little bit of a waste of yarn. But perhaps that's where I'm running into the issue is I knit a lot in the round, but I don't gauge swatch in the round. Or maybe I just need to be like, okay, if the gauge swatch flat is on gauge, then perhaps I need to go up in needle size slightly so that my final project is the right fit. Maybe I'll test some different methods throughout the year and just see what I'm happy with. But like I said, the gauge doesn't bother me on this project. I'm really, really happy with the overall fit. So I'm not gonna make a big deal about that. Now, final project cost for this, I used 10 balls of the Puro Lana yarn, which came to 90 euros and 25 cents, including shipping. And I used 5 balls of the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, which came to 43.75 with shipping. So total project cost for this sweater was 134 euros, which is definitely on the higher end of what I typically spend on a sweater. But I do really like the more luxurious feel of the Puro Lana yarn. It is 50% alpaca, 50% wool, which I've never used before. It's definitely a yarn that I would use again. It's very, very soft, and especially paired with the mohair. Knitting for Olive is one of my go-to mohairs. I think given what I expect to get in terms of wear out of the sweater, 134 euros might seem on the more expensive side, but I do think it will be worth it for me. And this is a project that will stay in my wardrobe for a while and that I will wear a lot. I'm just nervous with the color that I may end up spilling stuff on it. So I'm going to be extra, extra careful as I'm wearing this. Moving on to works in progress. I have 2 to share today. And one of those is a completely freestyle shawl that I ended up casting on. If you watched the last episode, you know that I have been planning with my Zauberball from Shawl. So this is the Zauberball Crazy in the color Late Autumn. I had already cast on and been planning to do the Tri-Gradient shawl from Stephen West, and that was a brioche shawl. I was pairing it with the Filcolana Arwetta in Dijon. However, I realized a brioche shawl right now is just going to take up a lot of mental energy and load for me, and I really wasn't sure about the yarn combination that I picked. I wasn't loving it. Decided to just trust my gut and go ahead and pull that out. I didn't want to wait on using this yarn. I really, really love all the different color variations in this. And so I was like, okay, what is something really easy that I can just cast on, mindlessly knit? I went through some basic shawl patterns. So originally I was thinking I would do the spring shawlette, I believe, from Francesca, an Italian knitter. That's been on my list for a while. I had a different yarn planned for it, but I didn't really want to do eyelets with this, and I noticed that her pattern didn't have an I-cord edge. So I really wanted to have an I-cord edge. I did some searching. I thought about maybe doing the Sophie shawl because I already have the pattern, but I didn't necessarily want to have to modify for the smaller needles. And therefore I decided, you know what, I like the overall kind of shape of the spring shawlette. I'm just gonna go ahead and figure out how to do an I-cord edge. So what I ended up doing, just a I-cord tab cast on, and I followed a Stephen West video for that. It might have even been the one from the Tri-Gradient Shawl. And then on every odd round, I would do a KFB after 3 stitches on the right and left side. Then on even rows, I would just knit across. And at the end of each row, I would slip the last 3 stitches to start forming that I-cord edge. So really, really basic. If I'm not explaining this clearly, I do have notes in my Ravelry page, so you can just go ahead and check. I was a little bit worried that with the Zauber ball, once I started to get to the longer parts at the top here, the stripes would start to look weird, but actually they're holding up really well. I have this much yarn left on my first ball. I do think, you know, this is a 90 something inch cord, of which I am pretty much using the whole thing, or a 90 centimeter cord, sorry. I do still need some length out of this. So I might dip into the second ball. I figure I'm just gonna get it to a length where I think I'm happy with it, lock it, see how it feels when I wrap it around. And if I need to keep going, I'll keep going. I do wish that I had ended up increasing on every single row, which is what Francesca did in her pattern, because then it would have grown a lot faster. Because I'm only doing every second, it is growing very, very slowly. Kind of long enough, but I think it needs to be even longer. I believe most of the shawl patterns I've come across that are this style are around 170 centimeters in overall length. That seems like overkill. I don't think I will be able to stick with it long enough to do that. So I'm probably aiming for about 120, 130 centimeters. I think that will be long enough that I can kind of wrap it and then just tuck it in, and it will look good with jackets. That's really all I'm intending here, is that it looks nice under a jacket. It's not the warmest yarn, right? Like, this is probably not the yarn you should be knitting a shawl with unless you pair it with something else. But I do really love the overall look of it. This yarn is just absolutely beautiful. I think the colors are gorgeous. I've loved just watching it knit up and change color, and it's very exciting to work on. It's also a nice train project for my commute to work. I mentioned in my winter knitting plans, I started a new job on January 2nd, and I have about an hour and a half commute to work, which I only have to go 1 or 2 days a week, but that is quite a lot of time. The train is incredibly busy, and so I've started in the morning getting up a little bit earlier, so I can take the train that gets me to work at 8:30 in the morning as opposed to 9, because that one is a tiny bit less busy, and therefore sometimes I luck out that I don't have somebody sitting next to me on the train and I can knit comfortably. But when somebody is sitting next to me, the train seats are quite cramped and I don't necessarily feel comfortable pulling out my knitting in that case. I'm not getting as much knitting time as I expected I would on the commute, but I do knit here and there. And this shawl is perfect because I really don't have to think about it while I'm working on it. It is still very small and portable. It fits into my nice little knitting bag, which goes into the purse that I take to work. And yeah, I am hoping to be wrapped up this project by the time I film my next podcast, whenever that might be. Then I think I'm done with winter accessories. I didn't really knit much of anything this season. I do have yarn for hats, but I think we're heading now, feels like we're heading into spring. I know it's still January, but it starts to feel like, okay, hats and gloves and that aren't as important. And therefore, I think I will just focus mostly on garments again. I also do intend at some point to actually knit the Tri-Gradient Shawl now that I have the pattern for it. But I think that will be a next season project as a way to try brioche again. I was quite enjoying the process. and it really felt like it was teaching me a new skill, but it's just not for this year. And then the third and final whip that I have for today is the Puro cardigan, which is by Rui Yamamuro. And I am absolutely loving this project. So I am knitting it in Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool in the color Nougat, which I originally bought for a zipper sweater light, but I didn't love the color on its own for that specific project. And also a lot of people have commented saying this yarn tends to felt when held on its own, or not felt, sorry. This yarn tends to pill when held on its own. And a lot of people recommended holding it with mohair. So I went ahead and bought the Gepard Kids Seta mohair in this beautiful chocolate brown. This is color 485, and I am holding these two together. I am a little bit hesitant of the combination because, as you can see, these browns really aren't in the same color family. But, you know, in the first little bit of this, I was feeling it wasn't working. But as I work on it more and more, I am starting to really enjoy the marling effect. It's maybe still not what I would have picked if intentionally buying these yarns for this project. I think it's going to work. So I don't really have a nice chocolate brown cardigan, but it's not that I don't have a nice chocolate brown cardigan. And this one is knitting up so quickly. I cast this on January 18th. It's January 26th right now. And I connected for the underarm yesterday. And I actually only have to knit about 6 centimeters on the body before starting the ribbing. This is quite a cropped cardigan. I might knit, because I'm doing size 1, I might knit a little bit more length so that it's a bit more in line with size 2, which I think is 3 centimeters longer. But I'm going to try it on with the jeans that I'm wearing today once I get to the right length and see, okay, if I add 9 centimeters of ribbing, how am I going to feel about it? I really, really like the boxy design of this cardigan, and also it's meant to mirror kind of old school trench coat design. If you look at the pictures, like, it's always hard to hold up a cardigan. But this ribbing line here, the way that it's formed, it kind of does not a perfect like straight line, but a little bit of a curved. And I think it just looks really nice on the shape of the body. So I'm excited to see once this is all done, how it's actually going to fit me. So far, this has just been a really, really quick knit. I am knitting it on 5.5 millimeter needles. Pattern calls for 6.5, but I ended up using a very similar yarn combination on my weekend slipover V-neck from Petite Knit a few years ago. And it was the exact same gauge. So I double checked my gauge on that project to make sure it did match the final pattern. It did. So I ended up just not bothering to gauge swatch on this. I just cast on. I checked the length measurement she referenced in the pattern once I finished all the raglan increases, and I was at that length. So I'm pretty sure I'm on track for this to fit properly. We'll see in the end. I'll probably be saying, oh, my gauge was slightly off, because it always is. So I'm hoping actually the body of this might be done this week. And then I expect the sleeves are going to knit up really quick because, yeah, on 5 millimeter needles, this is just knitting up very, very quickly. If I do like the fit of this cardigan, because it knits up so fast, I am actually thinking I'm going to go ahead and buy yarn for a second version. I don't know what color I would do, but I really, really want more cardigans, and especially because I don't love purling, the idea of purling on bigger needles is much more enticing than doing a smaller gauge project. And so, yeah, maybe you will see more of these. She has a few different patterns in this Puro line, and in general, I just think she has a very classic, beautiful aesthetic to her designs, and so I would recommend going and checking those out. Then I don't have any yarn acquisition, so I am just going to go ahead and do a really quick recap of what I am planning to knit, and also then we can talk about the knit along that I'm planning to do. So let's start there. I have mentioned in my winter knitting plans and in several videos before that I've been trying to find a purpose for this Gepard Kids Seta Red Panda, it's color 240 mohair that I bought in Lithuania last year. And I thought about holding it with a, what was it, Lana Grossa big wool merino yarn for the Tau sweater test knit. I didn't love the orange that I ended up getting, and I didn't love the orange paired with this specific mohair. So I've since abandoned that plan and decided to go back to my original feeling, which was I can't seem to pair this yarn with any other color perfectly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hold it on its own double and just make a mohair sweater. I think I mentioned in my winter knitting plans video, I was going to maybe hold this double for the Cognac Sweater by Atelier Caston. And I have since decided that I am gonna do that. And then I got a message from Nicotina Knits, and she is also going to knit this pattern. So we have decided to do a knit along for the Cognac Sweater or the Cognac Cardigan. So this designer only has a few patterns, but the nice thing about the Cognac line is she has two versions within each. So she has a version of the sweater and cardigan that just have I-cord, and she also has a version that has ribbing. Personally, for me, I think the mohair version would lend itself really well to the I-cord. So I'm going to do the I-cord version of the sweater and hold this double. So the pattern does call for a fingering and a lace weight held together. So specifically in the sweater version, it's the Olivia and Oliver fiber fingering yarn, which I've used before, is really nice, held with Filcolana Tilia mohair. I know in the past from other projects that I can get gauge of fingering and lace with just two mohairs, so I will swatch for this and then see if I need to go up or down in needle size. It does knit up at a worsted weight, at least for the sweater version, and the gauge is 16 by 22. This is knit on bigger needles. The pattern calls for 6mm, and I think this will be another one that knits up quite quickly. I personally really love this, so I was originally thinking I might do the Cumulus O-neck, which is also a really beautiful pattern, but I'm trying not to knit petite knit unless I really need to. I am trying to branch out and use other designers, and I really have always gravitated to this Cognac Sweater pattern. I really like the set-in sleeve detail that she has. I think that's going to work a little bit better on my specific body type. So I really want to give it a try. I also know a few people that have knit the Cognac Sweater before and had really good things to say about it. We really want to give some love to this designer because I think this Cognac series is super beautiful, and therefore we are going to be hosting a knit along in February running until March. We're still working out all the details for it, but go ahead and follow Nicotina Knits as well as myself on Instagram, and we'll be posting all the KAL details probably in the next week or two, and with a plan to kick it off around February 10th. We are also working with the designer to see if we can get a discount for the pattern. So if you don't own it already, just go ahead and wait on that because hopefully there will be a discount code coming. And we are trying to line up some prizes. So also if you are watching this and you are a yarn dyer or notions or any kind of vendor within the knitting space and you would like to offer to do prizes for this knit along, please go ahead and message myself or Nicotina Knits and let us know what you would be open to gifting for this. It would be nice to give away something. Instagram also has made running KALs a little bit more challenging with the removal of following hashtags. So people will need to tag us specifically in their posts so that we know that you've actually submitted an entry for this KAL. Anyway, all details to come, including start date, discount codes, prizes. Follow Instagram, and we will be sure to share the details on that soon and hopefully kick off around February 10th. So that's the plan for this yarn. I'm really happy to finally have a plan for it. I only have 5 balls, so there's a chance that I might need to buy some additional yarn. But I am hoping, because this sweater fits a little bit closer to the body and is cropped, I might be able to actually get away with the yarn that I have. We will see. And then the only other thing that is on my list to cast on in probably the next week or two is my skirt number 1 from My Favorite Things Knitwear, which I am using this beautiful Assayer Aran confetti yarn. So this is 100% wool, 160 meters for 100 grams. It's the Aran Tweed line. I think each skein was 14 euros. And I got 2 of these, which I might be playing a little bit of yarn chicken, but people had really good suggestions on my winter knitting plans video, which was to, when I fold the waistband, do that folded bit in a slightly different yarn because you won't be able to see it anyway. And then I can knit the rest of the skirt in this yarn. And I think that will probably allow me to win the game of yarn chicken, because I really don't want to buy another skein of this if I'm only going to need like 5 to 10 grams of it. It just feels like a waste of money, and I don't know what else I would use the leftover yarn for. So that's everything that I wanted to share today. It feels really, really good to be getting back around to knitting and feeling that excitement around having new projects, having things to look forward to. Like I said at the beginning, I really hope that if you're in the Netherlands, Amsterdam specifically, that you'll join on March 2nd at Cafe Brecht for the next Knitting in the Dam event. If you're interested in joining the KAL, please go ahead and leave a comment below and let us know. We will probably go ahead and start a group chat for that once we kick off the KAL officially. It was really nice to catch up with everybody today, and thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like and comment. It's always really nice to hear your thoughts. And as always, please go ahead and subscribe, turn on bell notifications. I hopefully will get back into the rhythm of posting podcast episodes roughly every 3 to 4 weeks. We will see how this goes. With starting a new job, I'm definitely a little bit busier and finding it difficult to fit in filming time, but as the sun starts to come out a bit more for longer, hopefully it will also be easier to film during the week. So great to be back, great to share my thoughts, and I will see you in the next episode.